Hi and welcome to this 3D Studio Max training video. My name's Gavin. A lot of you may know me as Gavin B off of CG Talk, and what we're going to be doing today is just creating a render effect plugin with Maxscript. We're just going to take a look at a few elements of it, such as actually telling 3D Studio Max to create a plugin effect. We're going to be having a look at updating the render dialog box and the progress bar. And then obviously we're just going to go through and actually look at editing pixels that Max has rendered from an image. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to do is just take a look at what we're going to be creating. So if we go to rendering and then effects and add, you see we've got this plugin here called color tint, and it has these values, well, these two rollouts, about and options. Now the first one is options, and under there we've got hue and saturation. So what the plugin will basically let you do is specify a value and actually adjust the hue and saturation of the image depending on those. So there you go, you can see that's kind of given it a bit of a sepia tone just from the two values. And the second rollout is just an about, just tells us what we've actually created, what we've done with the plugin. So we just put color tint in there. So that's what we're going to be going through and creating. Just quickly, as you saw in there, once it's rendered the image, you see that bar, the progress bar going across, and so we're going to be showing you how to use Maxscript to update that progress bar as well. So if we just delete that and close it, and Maxscript and new script. We'll start with a blank script. The first thing that we actually want to do is tell 3D Studio Max that we're creating a plugin, and the way that we do that is we literally use the command plugin. Now this has various mandatory and optional parameters. Now the first thing that we need to tell, which is mandatory, is what we want to create. If you just select the word plugin and F1, you can see that there's an option called superclass, and basically classes are telling Maxscript what we're creating. You've got atmospheric, render effects, texture map, material, track view, utility, simple mod, etc. What we're doing is creating the render effect, so we need to specify that we're creating a render effect. So we literally just do that by putting render effect. The next thing, as always, is an internal name, and we're going to give it a name of color tint. Oh, color tint, not color tiny. And again, the next one that we want to put in is an optional parameter now, and this optional parameter is name. This is the name that you'll see in the effects dialog when you do update scene, or the actual render dialog when you properly render the scene. And we're just going to specify the name color tint, so it will specify that in the render dialog at render time. The next one is one that we haven't looked at before, and that is class ID. Now the class ID again is isn't mandatory, it is an optional field, and what the class ID does is it will give it a unique name internally to Max, so you can actually save the plugin with the scene. So next time you load the scene, all the details will be there. Now again, I say this is optional simply for the fact that you don't always need to load and save information with the scene. However, because this is a render effect, obviously we want it to save and load each time. Now the way that you get this class ID is with the Maxscript listener. Just clear that out. You come into the Maxscript listener and type gen class ID, open and close brackets to specify there are no parameters. Hit return, and you'll get this little string of characters and numbers and letters, and that's our unique identifier to Max. So we can specify that now straight after class ID. Need the hash in there as well. Okay, and they are all the optional and mandatory parameters we will need for this scene, simply for the fact this plugin really doesn't do that much. So we need the open and close brackets after to specify that the block of code that follows is the plugin itself. The first thing we want to do within the plugin is create the rollouts. So the first rollout was the options. So we'll call it OPT roll, and that's the internal name. We'll give it a caption of options. Oh, we don't need to put rollout in there because we know it's a rollout. We'll just call it options. Open and close brackets to specify that what's in these block of codes is the rollout. and we want to give it the two spinners that we saw. So we use the spinner. We'll give it a name of hue spin for the spinner for hue. Give it a caption of hue. Give it a range. I don't know. We'll go 0. Obviously, start for 0, 255. Maximum. Default of. Give it a different default. Actually, 27. And we want to specify. We want it type integer, so we can only have whole numbers. And then we want the second spinner, which was saturation, so we call it sat spin. Give it a caption of saturation. A range, just for simplicity and argument's sake, we might as well give it the same range, 0, 255. We'll give this a default of 0. So that's the options rollout, all designed and done there, so a very short rollout. So all we've got is two spinners in the rollout, one for hue, one for saturation. Oh, actually, again, we might as well specify that we want it of type integer. So yep, we've got the two spinners, one with internal name of hue spin, caption of hue, range of minimum 0, maximum 255, and a default of 27, and it can only be whole numbers. Second one, spinner again, called sat spin, caption of saturation, range again minimum 0, maximum 255, but this one has a default of 0, and it will be of type integer. The next rollout now was the rollout that we just had the little bit of information, we called that about, so we'll call that info roll. We'll put about as a caption. We only had one command in this, which is a label. A label basically is a static text. You can't click on it and edit it like you could a text input field, and you can't really change the value by using the interface at all. So we'll just call this info label, and we'll just put color tint effect. Okay. So next we've got basically the main block of code for the plugin. Now on the first line of the code itself for the actual plugin, we need to do a few things. Firstly, obviously we need to specify that we're going to be now applying the effect to an image. We also need to capture the rendered image, and we also want to enable the progress bar updates. Okay, so we do that by saying on apply. We can then specify a variable name which will capture the rendered image. This one we might as well just call RIMG, so for rendered image. And we then need something we've not looked at before called progress CB, or progress callback. And this is basically allocating progress callback for us to be able to go ahead and update the render dialog. Then we have do at the end, just to say do this final block of code every time that you apply the filter to the rendered image. And obviously we need to update the progress bar as we go. So the first thing we're going to do is actually change the caption of the progress bar. We're going to actually change it just to reflect what we're doing. So what we can do is just use progress callback dot, and then specify the attribute of set title, then specify a title. So we're saying that we want to set the title, and we'll say color tint effect. So when we're rendering, we'll get a caption in the above the progress bar saying color tint effect, just to let us know that it's now processing our block of code that we're now writing. What we also want to do is we just want to basically turn off the escape interruption. So we can do that basically by using a few commands. The first we want to do is capture the state of escape interruption. By escape interruption, I mean when you press and hold the escape key to exit the render. We just want to turn that off for a little while we go through this block of code, and let's say we want to capture the value that it is at the moment. So once we finished our block of code, we can set it back to whatever it was previously. So we'll set up a local variable. Now a local variable is one that will only be in memory during the execution of this block of code. As soon as this block of code is done, this variable will be discarded from memory of our application. Ooh. So we've got local variable, we'll call this old state, and we want to set old state to be exactly the same as the current value of escape enable. Then what we want to do is turn off the escape enable, so we set escape enable to be equal to false. It's a boolean value, so it can be true or false. So what we're doing is just capturing the value of this to store temporarily in a local variable. We're then setting the value of it to false, no matter what it is at the moment. So whether it's already false, obviously if we try and set it to false again, we're not really going to be doing anything, but if it's true, we're going to be changing it. Next thing, we want to just really set up two variables, one for the width of the picture and one for the height. Now, the reason that we're doing this is literally just to make our life easier. We don't have to set up a variable. We can capture these from the image every time that we need them, but just to shorten the code, we're going to capture them into two small variables. One we're going to call image width, and that's going to be set to the width of our IMG. So our IMG, if you remember, is the rendered image that we're capturing here. And it has an attribute called width, and we can access that using the equal sign and store it temporarily in this variable. So we want to go ahead and just do the same for the height. So now we've got these two variables. Rather than having to type this every time we want to access it, we can just do this. And obviously if for any reason it ever changed, we could update the variables at any time by just using this code again. What we now need to do is set up two loops, one to process down the image, and then for every time that we go down by one line, we also want to work our way across then, so we have another loop inside. So it's basically embedding loops within each other. So the way that we're going to do that is with for loops. So we want for, and then we're going to use variable named y simply for the fact that normally when you're accessing a map or a graph or something, you use x and y for the across and down values that you're using. So we want for y, which will be our down value, we want to start this off at 0, so we're starting at the very top of the image, and we want to go to the height of the image, but we want to go -1. The reason that we're going -1 is because we're starting off at 0. If we went just to image height, we would be going, so for instance, say the image was 480 pixels high, we'd be going from 0 to 480, which is 481 lines then. So we actually want to go from 0 to 479, which is the right amount of lines. We then put do to tell it to execute the following block of code, and again, as always, we open and close our brackets. Now, because, as I say, we're going to work our way down one line at a time, and as we go down by one line, we work across the line that we're currently at. So for every line that we go down, we want to update the progress bar in the render dialog to show how far we've got through processing the whole image. Now, the way that we can do that is progress cb.progress. So this is saying that we're going to update now the value of the progress within the progress callback. We then need to specify two values. The first value is what we currently have, so where we currently are, which is we're currently at the position y. We then need to tell it what the maximum is, what the maximum value can be, so it knows, you know, what percentage to display. So in brackets we'll just put img height -1, because we're working from 0 to 479, remember. Okay. So this will update the progress bar to display the value, a percentage of how far, using this variable, we are up against this one. Now, doing this, it will actually this will actually return a boolean value, either true or false, depending on whether these two numbers match or not. So we can actually test for that. So if progress callback.progress returns true, so the two values are the same, we want to exit from this whole loop, exit out, break out the whole cycle. And the reason that we're putting that in there is simply for the fact that we don't know at this point what it is. So if these two values are the same, we don't then want to go around and process this whole loop again, which we wouldn't know that we were doing, because this is how it's set up, unfortunately. So we just test here whether they are or not. If they are the same value, then we'll just break out. What we now need to do is actually collect all the details about the row of pixels that we're currently at. So the row of pixels at Y, we want to gather all the info about them and store it in an array. An array basically is a way of collecting multiple types of the same data in one variable. So we're going to have a variable, or which will become an array, called pixel row, to tell us what row we're on. And we want to capture a row of pixels from the image. We do that with get pixels. We then specify the image that we want to capture them from, and then we specify an x and y coordinate. So we always want to start off at the beginning of the row, the 0 value across. We want to start off at the first pixel, but we want to tell it what row we're currently at, so we'll use y again as we go down the image. We then need to specify how many pixels we want to capture, so we want to do imgw, the width of the image. We want to, so if it's 640 pixels wide, we want to capture all 640 pixels, starting at pixel 0 in row y. Once we got that, we're going to need to go through and basically process them. So this is where the second for loop comes in. So for x, because we've already got y, remember, and this one will actually start off at 1 and go to imgw, and we want to do the following block of code. So open and close brackets after the do, and we want to edit the current pixel, x. X will be our current pixel along. So we'll do pixel row. In the square brackets we put x to tell it that we want to access that pixel in the array. We then want to access the attribute h for hue. Now, how do we tell it what we want to set the hue to? Well, we've got these spinners up here, hue spin, but because it's in a rollout, the data from that is only accessible in the rollout. We can't now check the value down here. What we can do is add a new block of code up here called parameters. Now, parameters basically is going to be a block of variables that will be saved and loaded with the scene. So we can access these anywhere in the actual plugin that we're creating. So when we save the scene and it saves the actual plugin, because we've got the class ID up here, we also want it to save these parameters so we can access them at any time, and obviously it will update these two spinners, and I'll show you how we do that now. So we give it the internal name and we'll call it opt param, so for options parameters, and we then need to tell it what rollout we want to link it to. So we do rollout colon to tell it that we want to link it to rollout, and we called this rollout opt roll. So we then put opt roll, and then the open and close brackets. So this parameters block is going to be linked to this rollout. Now what we need to do is create two variables that are linked to the values of these two spinners, and the way that we'll do that is we'll give it a variable name of hue val. We'll give it a type of integer, simply because we have in the actual rollout itself. We then need to tell it what user interface element, what we've created on the rollout, do we want to actually link it to. So we use UI, then a colon to tell it what follows is the user interface element we're linking it to, and we want to link this first one to hue spin. Remember, hue spin is this spinner here. This spinner is called hue spin, so we're linking this variable to that spinner, and we want to give this a default value just to match it. So this default value was 27. We'll give this the same default value. Return, not enter. So then sat val type integer user face element. We want to link it to sat spin, and we'll give this a default value the same as the spinner. There we go, that's better, and that was 0. If you remember, down here we set it to 0. So now we have two variables that are linked to this rollout, the values of which will actually be saved and loaded every time you save and load the scene, and there's something that we can also actually access down here now. So after here, if we put hue val, pixel row, we want to edit pixel x dot s equals sat val. So all we're doing here is setting the hue and saturation value in conjunction with these two variables, and those two variables will reflect the values of the spinner. What we now need to do is, after this, we need to once we've set the whole row, once we've captured this, gone through this whole row in this loop and adjusted the hue and saturation, we now need to update the rendered image that we have stored up, that we captured up here in the R image variable. So we need to do set pixels RIMG. We now need to specify where on the image we actually want to place this new and updated row of pixels. So again, we need to specify an x or y coordinate. So again, we want to start off at 0 in the x direction, but we want to place them at row y. And again, remember, row y is updated every time this loop here is executed, so it's something that we need to do every time. And now we need to tell it what we want to put on in these values. So we captured them into an array called pixel row. So we now need to tell set pixels that we want to update row y starting at place 0 with this variable, with this array, and we want to stick it on top of this image. So after that one, we then need to go and do the decent thing and just set the escape state that we changed back to what it was. So we'll just do escape enable equals, and we stored it in old state, if you remember, just right there, old state. No. Okay, so that's, now we've gone through, set the pixels back to what we've changed them to, and now we want to now we just want to set the state back. Okay, so what we'll do now is actually just have a quick flick up, just to make sure the source code looks okay, and then we're going to go ahead and execute. Okay, so actually no, the state, actually before we execute, you may actually want to go through, I actually missed out the then in the if statement. I've just gone back through and put it back in now. So that should be if progress cb.progress y, and then the image width, then exit if it returns true. So if you just put the then back in that I missed out, and then we'll file, evaluate all, and in your Maxscript listener, which I have open down here, you should have color tint and then OK. So just close and save the script for now. We'll save it as sepia tone. We can go back to render effects, and under here we should have a new effect, color tint. If you select it, you'll get the default dialogue and the rollouts that we created with the hue and saturation. So I'm just going to go through and change these again like we did previously. We'll set it up here somewhere, and we'll put that about there. Then if we do update scene, we'll see that it goes down on the render as normal. Oh, I've obviously mucked something up in the script. Let's just open it quickly. Okay, the reason I was actually getting the error message there is because I actually put a space between image height and -1 in this block of code. So if we take it out, get rid of that out there, and file evaluate all, we should, fingers crossed, if we save this and color tint, be able to adjust one of these. Update scene, you'll see the image rendering, and you'll see the progress bar shoot across, and we end up with a green image. So it is working now. We can update scene again, and again, as soon as it's finished rendering, you'll get the dialogue and the green image. And we can adjust the hue up to about 203. Update, and it should adjust the color slightly on the image as well. We now have a purple image, so it's working perfectly fine. We'll bring that down to 66. Bring that down to about 50, and as we did before, actually take it to 27, 28, update scene. Again, we'll get the sepia type image, probably a bit too light really. There we go, that's fine. The good thing is, I mean, these hue and saturation values that you play around with are pretty much similar to the ones that you actually get in Photoshop if you use Photoshop. So you can experiment in Photoshop and transfer that technique really into to 3D Studio Max. Now the other thing I just wanted to show, so if I close that for a second and hit render, if I bring my render dialog over, you'll see this progress bar here update as well with color tint effect. So the progress callback that we put in there updates both the one in the render effects panel and the one in the actual render dialog itself. Okay, so that's really all I was looking to cover in this video. It's just a simple render effect. Sorry about the mistakes in there, but we corrected them easy enough. And as you can see, I mean, you can really do a lot with Maxscript, and it gets more and more powerful the more and more you look into it. So obviously the best learning place for it is the Maxscript reference, and obviously there are always people on the net willing to help out over at the CG Talk forums and at the discrete support forums as well. So obviously never be afraid to ask any questions. I never am, and you really shouldn't be. Everyone's always willing to help in some way or another. So what we'll cover in the next video is we're going to take a look at using user interfaces a bit more. We're going to have a look at all of really, or as many as we can, the different types of elements you can put on a user interface, such as the spinners, text box, angle, controls. We can have a look a bit more of the rollouts themselves and ways that you can actually adjust the rollouts themselves. So thank you for watching this video. I hope you found some use for it, and I hope to see you on the next one. Thank you.